THC, Homelessness and Housing Policy, the right way. Hello and welcome to the Wright Report Week in Review. On the Week in Review, we bring you weekly headline reports of homeless news and housing policy in the Denver metro area, and some national items as well. The Week in Review consists of reading of local headlines in my fancy smancy sponsor's announcer's voice, followed by a quick summary of the contents and perhaps a host from your host. That's me, Benjamin Wright, Wright. We'll also produce some in-depth reports on various news items as time and technology allows. To find other episodes, visit us on YouTube at The Wright Report. That's THEWRIGHTREPORT. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We at The Wright Report would like you to be better informed by reviewing the news coverage of homelessness and housing policy, paying attention to how the coverage is framed and who framed it, hence the commentary, and with a little luck, have some fun along the way. So let's get it right with The Wright Report. That's WRIGHT. This episode of the Wright Report's Week in Review covers the last week of Colorado's legislative session. There was a lot of last-minute housing and land use policy things that came up and were reported on. So the long and the short of it is this episode is going to be long, so we're going to break it up in a few sections to help you out. In the meantime, I invite you to enjoy this week's version of The Wright Report. That's WRIGHT. Colorado lawmakers reject push to prevent local short-term rental rules from applying to backcountry huts and cabins. Senate Bill 213, which was connected to the wealthy owner of backcountry property outside Crested Butte, drew the ire of counties. The Colorado legislature on Saturday, amid growing opposition from counties worried about losing their ability to make rules around construction and lodging, killed a bill that would have prevented local governments from imposing short-term rental regulations on backcountry cabins and huts. Senate Bill 213 was unanimously rejected by House State, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee on Saturday evening at the request of one of the measure's main sponsors, Representative Julie Amabile, a Democrat from Boulder. Amabile said that she asked the bill to be shelved because of, quote, disheartening, end quote, narrative had emerged alleging that she and the other main sponsor of the legislation were possibly bribed into introducing the measure. Commentary, considering last week, there was an organization that introduced an amendment that killed a bill that they didn't want passed. I don't put these kinds of shenanigans and happenings from being off the table. She said that the Senate President Steve Fenberg, another Boulder Democrat, were simply responding to a constituent's concern. Commentary. Even if it was nice and legal-like, me thinks that there's something to it, and they just didn't want to get exposed. Oh! And I just don't want to be breaking all my stuff. Oh my goodness.
Fun? You call that fun? That was boring.
All right, that's some outtake stuff to work with. Quote, I want to make it clear, Amabile said, a coalition of Coloradans who are passionate about what makes Colorado brought this to us. A few powerful people with a whole bunch of money, enough to make and bribe people to introduce legislation, can certainly be labeled as a coalition. Here, the use of language. Here, the use of language is designated to make what could possibly be a few or even one rich people sound like a lot of people. Enter wash, rinse, repeat here. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with the institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Amityville said that in 2020, when the legislature gave permission to local governments to regulate short term rentals, they intended for those regulations to address permanent housing. Commentary. What they claim they intended and what they actually put into the law may not necessarily be the same thing. Colorado legislature. Colorado legislature. Property tax agreement is elusive. Land use bills advance. Medical malpractice deal. Final days of the General Assembly session before the session ends Wednesday. The Colorado legislature is returning Sunday during the final weekend of work in its 2024 session, set to end Wednesday. Among other pieces of legislation still pending are gun regulations, housing, land use policy, transportation, property tax policy reform, and other priorities. Quote, there's no agreement on anything, end quote. A frustrated Representative Chris DeGroy Kennedy, a Lakewood Democrat involved in the negotiations, said Sunday. The session ends Wednesday, and the clock is ticking. Any bill that hopes to pass before the time expires must be introduced on Monday at the latest, and the earlier the better. Even introducing it the first thing Monday will require swift work to finish up by Wednesday, and the late arrival has grim echoes of last year's scramble that led to the failure of Proposition HH in November. The problem now is that Colorado Concern, the powerful business group, is asking for provisions that would include cuts to local education, said Scott Wasserman, the president of the Progressive Bell Policy Center. That's a non-starter, DeGroy Kennedy added. You know, this would be a good opportunity for reporters to name the politicians that are owned by this powerful business group and then call into question whether or not these representatives are representing their constituents or the people that funded their campaigns. Just evidence of how parts of our media protect corruption by choosing not to cover it or covering it in such a way that there's not an outcry about it. So part of what we intend to do here at the Wright Report is to inform you about how the news is being covered and who's being reported on and how. So we're going to take a minute here to talk about Colorado Concern so that you know that who these people were holding the legislation hostage. This is from their website. Membership in Colorado Concern is by invitation of the board of directors and reserved for the CEO or the company's highest ranking business leader in Colorado. Just so you know, that's not you. They're not concerned about their next mortgage payment or when the rent is due or how they're going to fix the repairs on their car. These are the kinds of folks that have third and fourth homes, not including whatever rentals they might happen to own, and they don't have the kinds of financial concerns that 99.999% of the rest of us have. These are the people that are influencing your politicians. This is a side note for your information. This same group, Colorado Concern, they have a members-only exclusive briefing with the mayor, Mike Johnson, on June 26th. You're not going to get that. They bought that. He's reporting to them, telling them how he's serving them. That's what the briefing is. When you brief somebody, you're rebriefing your higher ups. Special audience with the mayor that you, a regular citizen of Colorado, are not invited to. Colorado Concern has a lot of listed events like this on their website. Events that only events that are only for those individuals invited by Colorado Concern to be members. We'll provide this link along with others in the comments, just in case you want to know what they're up to and who they're influencing. Unfortunately, you won't see our local media take any time to even do what little I did to help us understand who this powerful business group was, who they consist of. These are the people, remember, according to this article, these folks basically held up the Colorado legislative session to get what they wanted. They wouldn't let anything pass. They're not even elected officials. These are the people who are paying off our officials, likely through campaign contributions. So it's all nice and legal like. Wash, rinse, repeat. And your local news doesn't even take time to cover it. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with the institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with the institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with the institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Effort to limit lawsuits over construction errors and in turn boost Colorado condo construction fails at Capitol. Senate Bill 106 died in a House committee Friday evening after it became clear the measure didn't have enough votes to pass, and there was no path to compromise. In an effort to encourage condominium construction in Colorado by reducing the chance of lawsuits over building errors, failed in a state House committee Friday evening, a sign of how complicated and politically fraught the issue is. Senate Bill 106, so-called Construction Defects Bill, was unanimously rejected by the House Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee. At the request of one of the legislation's main sponsors, Representative Shannon Byrd, a Westminster Democrat, Byrd said that the bill didn't have enough votes to pass the House, the legislation's more liberal chamber, and there was no path to compromise. With such little time left in Colorado's legislation session, which ends on Wednesday. Quote, "We have run out of time," Byrd said, vowing to bring the issue back to the Capitol in 2025. The measure, which was watered down in the Senate, was seen by proponents, including developers in the business community, as a way to prompt construction of more homes that middle-income Coloradans can afford. The median sale price of a single-family home in Colorado was about $625,000 in November, according to Redfin, while the median state price of a condo was about $400,000. However, opponents, including the state's trial lawyers and progressive Democrats in the legislature, feared that it would leave homeowners more susceptible to inferior construction. Here's another one of those Colorado Concern guys. Colorado lawmakers reached last-minute bipartisan property tax deal that averts cuts K-12 funding. The measure comes with 3 days left in Colorado's 2024 lawmaking term. The minimum amount of time it needs to pass and comes after negotiation with Colorado Concern, a business group that was backing a bigger cut on the November ballot. Colorado's property tax code would be reimagined with long-term rate cuts for homeowners and businesses and a local revenue cap under a fiercely negotiated last-minute bipartisan bill introduced in the legislature Monday that aims to provide tax relief while protecting funding for K-12 schools. The measure, Senate Bill 233, comes with just 3 days left in Colorado's 2024 legislative session, the minimum amount of time needed to pass a bill. And it was the product of negotiations with Colorado Concern, a nonprofit representing CEOs in the state that was working on a plan to ask voters on the November ballot for an even bigger property tax break. Lawmakers, Governor George Polis's office, and interested groups We're working through the weekend with Colorado Concern to reach an agreement. Commentary. The last I understood was Colorado Concern were not elected officials, and therefore not necessarily any need to meet any agreement with them. The owners of your politician not only get social access to negotiate with them, but they also have veto authority. None of these folks are elected. The nonprofit said a deal hasn't been reached yet, but that it's continuing to work with lawmakers on Senate Bill 233 and will continue its ballot measure push in the meantime. Still, the legislation is the cumulation of months of back and forth since voters last year rejected Proposition HH and sent the legislation back to the property tax drawing board. The people don't want it, but they keep pushing for it. Remember, this is a small amount of people, this Colorado Concern, folks. It's a small amount of people who own a whole bunch of property. They're just looking for a tax cut for the rich. Don't let them fool you. And they have the power to interrupt our legislature. And the media won't tell you who they are. Quote, this policy reflects some tough choices, but finds meaningful property tax reductions while protecting the future of our K through 12 funding, said Representative Chris DeGray Kennedy, a Lakewood Democrat, who's one of the main sponsors of the bill. Commentary. Truth be known, you could run your political campaigns without their contributions and still get elected, you dillheads. If you weren't so readily for sale, you wouldn't have this problem. Wash, rinse, repeat. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with the institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with the institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Political leaders respond by sounding sympathetic to their constituents, but vote with the institutions that fund their political campaigns. Wash, rinse, repeat. Y'all getting a little tired of the wash, rinse, repeat refrain? Then don't put up with the vote of those people who don't put up with the people whose votes are purchased by a privileged few. Vote these guys out of office. You need folks that represent you. But hopefully, here at the Wright Report, that's WRIGHT, you'll be better equipped to recognize these folks when they're lying to your face, trying to run for office, and then voting against your interest. Wash, rinse, repeat. Colorado lawmakers pass bipartisan property tax relief as 2024 legislation session comes to a close. The General Assembly hopes that their legislation will persuade voters not to back property tax measures on the November ballot that would ravage state and local government budgets. Colorado lawmakers Wednesday evening sent Governor Jared Polis a last-minute bipartisan property tax relief bill. Property tax relief. Those rich guys wanting their vast properties, swaths of property, to be taxed less. Win again. How did they do it? As the state's 2024 legislation came to a close, Senate Bill 233, introduced Monday after a month of negotiations, was one of the final bills passed before the General Assembly gavelled out for the year. The legislature hopes the bill will persuade voters not to back property tax measures on the November ballot that would ravage state and local government budgets. The measure, which would likely save the average homeowner several $100s annually. Commentary. Now, these words are a marketing ploy to get you to like the bill by saying that it's going to save your average homeowner a couple $100s a year. The people who lobbied for this are people who are going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars on property taxes. They were the ones that held this bill from getting through in the first place. Let's continue. calls for holding residential and commercial property tax rates steady this year. Commentary. Let us be perfectly clear here. The average homeowner does not own commercial property, yet it's part of the bill. Yet it's the people who own the large amounts of commercial property who were messing with our legislature in the passage of this bill. Let's continue. For taxes owed in 2025, the residential property assessment would be 6.7% for $55,000 value reduction, and the commercial rate would be 27.9% with a $30,000 value reduction. Because the rates are supposed to rise under the current law, however, that will cost schools roughly $350 million, money that would be reimbursed out of the state's education fund, which is filled with income tax revenue. Remember, our schools are paid for with property taxes, so every time they go down, our teachers get a pay cut or something. About $10 million in reimbursements would be made to local governments who would lose money under the plan compared to their 2022 revenues. The vast majority of the hit to local governments won't be reimbursed. However, the revenues in most communities are still growing because of the effect of rising property values on tax bills.